Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. Mo, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing well. It's going to hit 100 degrees here in DC tomorrow. So it's going to be nice and toasty. I thought we escaped the summer heat, but no, it's still here for a couple more weeks.
I just got back from London a couple of days ago, and I must have picked up. I was only thinking the other day. I was thinking that you never see people with a cold in the summertime, and then I went back to the UK. Must have picked something up on the flight, and I've had this terrible cold for about 3 days. So apologies if I sound a little bit.
Yeah, I know you're talking about that. I'm actually headed to Ireland tomorrow and to the UK in a couple of weeks. So I'm like, should I mask up again? Should I be taking some echinacea? But you're right. I think the airplane, the airport travel, the people, there's still things that are floating around, right? So we need to be careful about that. But you sound okay. You sound well.
Yeah. So we got an interesting episode today. Who we got joining?
Well, we've got Jack Thomas. Jack, I believe you're in Singapore.
It's Bangkok,
Oh,
Thailand at the
oh,
moment.
Bangkok. Keep on messing that up every time that we talk. You're coming from Bangkok, Thailand. You are. We're here to talk about the Fit Guide, which is something I want to get into here shortly. But you also run your own boutique business called Base. You have your own podcast as well. So you kind of do a lot of different things for the fitness industry. And I've been fortunate to have gotten to know you over the last couple of years. I know you and Matthew have known each other for quite some time, but I'm excited to dig into this report that you put together with a partner as well. And it's incredibly comprehensive. I mean, Matthew and I were going through it earlier today and said, there's a lot of pages, there's a lot of data. So we got to kind of really hit the key points on this episode.
Yeah, we really wanted to get as much out there as possible. After we'd done our first year of evaluations, we were kind of looking at all of this data, thinking, what do we do with it? Do we sort of safeguard it? Do we only share it with the clients that we're working with? And our original mission was to really help the fitness industry improve. So we just wanted to get it in the hands of as many people as possible. And you both obviously contributed as well and gave some insights going a little bit deeper than the data, which I think is important to add a bit more context. But we just wanted to get it out there. And that's why it's great to have this opportunity today to talk about it more.
So you've got a number of different reports, Jack, and they're structured. They've got a specific structure. So why don't you give us an overview of what the different reports that you put together, and then the motivation behind the various different pieces of work that you've created.
Yeah, let's start off with the second one. So this all started with a chance conversation about 2 years ago with a good friend of mine, Matt Lavender, who has been in hospitality for 20 years, and he works at Forbes Travel Guide for 8 years. So he was the global head of evaluations for Forbes Travel Guide, who created the 4 and 5 star review system for hotels. And it's not just hotels, it's also spas and restaurants and really across hospitality. And when he was telling me about the process that he went through with the world's leading hospitality brands, it made me realize that the fitness industry really needed something like this. And it was kind of a bit of a light bulb moment for both of us. And we went through the whole process he went through with hotels. We pulled in people from fitness and hospitality. And we spent about 9 or 10 months just creating an evaluation process that really represented what an incredible fitness experience should be. And that starts off when you book the class online, when you make a telephone call to the branch with an inquiry, when you arrive, the full group class experience, post-class service. It really covers everything. And we nailed it down to 250 standards. And we thought the best way to get it out there was to go to the world's leading clubs. So we visited 50 clubs in New York, Singapore, London, Sydney, and Dubai. And we hired evaluators, many of which came from hospitality. That's more of Matt's background. And then we went into every single club and evaluated that full experience. So each evaluation takes all in about 6 or 7 hours. It's an hour or two for the visit. We always arrive early to allow the club and the staff the opportunity to score the standards. And there's about a 3 or 4 hour process afterwards, nailing down each of the individual standards. So it took a long time to get to the evaluation process and to build that. And then, as I said, we wanted to get it out there. So we visited clubs all around the world. We contacted each club individually so that we could discuss it and help them improve. And now we're on to sort of the next phase, really, which is really getting the message out there and really trying to build the fitness industry up and really getting these messages out about the things that we're not doing well and the things we should be doing.
Well, I think the report is timely. I think the work is fantastic. Look, 2024 has been in a lot of ways what we expected it to be. It's been a year of consolidation. It's been a year of transformation. I've been using a word called exogenous and just to describe the kind of transformation that we're seeing in the industry. And brands and business owners are really struggling to figure out, especially a global strategy. I mean, it's relatively not easy, but it is achievable to understand a micro strategy when you're looking at a domestic market, even in a big city like New York. It's a little bit more difficult to figure out a national strategy. It's very difficult to figure out an international strategy. So I think by you doing the work that you're doing, kind of curating some of the data, is going to be a really helpful tool. And I think just going into one of those themes, I want to also bring up a current event article that we had talked about. Matthew, I'm going to hand it back to you to introduce this article.
This is an article, CNBC, about strength training getting more popular. We've seen companies like Peloton moving into strength. There's a reference to Planet Fitness moving into more of a focus on strength as well. From what we see within the manufacturing side, fitness equipment manufacturing side of the industry, there's certainly a big shift away from traditional cardio. And it seems that the consumers now are demanding a lot more from the strength product than before. And in addition, I think there's a number of different articles now, Wall Street Journal as well, where they were talking about the over 50s now, are particularly over 50s women, how popular it is to do strength training. So I guess in relation to some of the reports that you've been doing, Jack, what do what do you see is driving this? Because I guess I understand it from a US perspective, but from an international perspective, what do you see that's causing this? Is it a rebound from the pandemic where people have not been able to get strength training in the same way as what they have now? The gyms are opening, or is there, is there something else behind it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't see it as a rebound, and it says there that strength training gets more popular. I mean, I think this has happened kind of in slow motion over the last 10 or 15 years, really. I mean, if I speak for a moment from my club operator and owner perspective, we've just seen it increase in popularity here in Bangkok for the last 10 or 12 years. I know Singapore has seen a similar trend. There's a whole ton of strength concepts there that have really kind of pushed cardio and HIIT and conditioning really to one side and are just focusing on strength. Personal training in this region has also kind of taken the same trajectory, I think, where a personal trainer won't really just chuck them on a treadmill, but will really focus on strength training. And when I've been visiting over the years before the Fit Guide, London, Sydney, New York, I've certainly seen this huge trend toward fitness as well. So I don't think this has happened since the pandemic. I don't think this has happened overnight. This has just been a gradual increase and absolutely a trend. It's something which has been happening for 10 years, and I think it will continue to happen for the next 10 years. For me, the reasons are, I think people are just sick of being really tired and really exhausted from doing just a lot of cardio or a lot of high intensity interval training. HIIT, if it's not delivered in the right way, and we have standards around this in terms of coaching and making sure plyometrics, jumping exercises are coached correctly. That isn't always done in this space, and we've seen that through the Fit Guide. So there's can be more injuries, whereas strength training typically, if it's done correctly, protects against injuries as well. And then with this other trend with longevity and quality of life, there's so much research now coming out and anecdotal stories from people who are benefiting from strength, that people are living better, they're living longer. It's keeping them out of old people's homes into their 70s and 80s and keeping them very active through their 50s plus. So I think the combination of the research, combination of how it feels to do strength training over just tons of cardio, and also the benefits that you get, I think is really spurring this drive, and I'm here for it for sure.
If you think about CrossFit that's been around, I don't know, what year did CrossFit hit the market?
In 2006 or so, I think was the first CrossFit Games at least, and it's been around in some form for a few years before that.
Because if you think about it, CrossFit was really strength training, and it kind of evolved and had the label of functional training, but really it was predominantly strength training. And then I guess if you look at what was delivered in a lot of the health clubs, it became more of a softer version of functional training, and everybody sort of moved down that direction. And then after the pandemic, it seemed to be relabeled strength training, but I just wondering if it was if things evolved to a slightly different way for people to do strength training, which was, less advanced as to what you were doing in CrossFit, because certainly doing CrossFit for the average person is pretty difficult. Whereas if you want to do strength training, then sitting on a machine, which
Yep.
I'm certainly seeing a lot more popularity, whether that's plate load or fixed resistance, is an easier way for anybody to get involved in strength training. So I just wonder if, like you said, and I hadn't thought about it, but whether just how we're labeling this sounds as though it's suddenly become popular, where really people have been interested in that form of exercise for a lot longer than probably what what we realize.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a good observation. I think one of CrossFit's strongest legacies is how it's got people doing more strength training, but the movements are incredibly advanced. We've got Olympic lifting, snatches, barbell exercises, handstand walks. So I think that was kind of part of the appeal for a lot of people. But it got more people into doing strength training. And maybe the people that couldn't do that were at least doing deadlifts and these compound movements that were once sort of shunned by people as being sort of dangerous or bad for your back. CrossFit definitely sort of put the message out that, hey guys, this is good to do and this is important. And then since then, I think you're absolutely right, Matthew, it's evolved. So now more people are doing strength training. Not everyone can do these kind of advanced movements. Not everyone wants to do these kind of advanced movements for whatever reason. So we're seeing more things, like you said, machines, plate loaded machines and the like coming in, and we're seeing different approaches to strength. And again, that's why it's great to see someone like Peloton come in with their own spin on it. If it gets more people lifting, if it gets more people stronger and helps them retain more muscle mass, then that's a good thing.
One other thing too, I think there's been a destigmatization of strengths. When you look at even the history of strength, typically, even going back to the Greeks and the Egyptians, so much of it was around building muscle, built around men, strength around men. There was this machoism around strength. And really over the last couple of decades, the evolution of strength, there's been data and research around really a couple of key things. One has been the importance of strength for women's health, and that women actually lose bone density at a much more faster pace than men, especially in the post-menopause years. The other one, I think, is around the focus on longevity, Jack, as he had mentioned. There's really three key pillars for longevity, strength being one, VO2 max being two, and mobility and flexibility being the third. You have to hit those three in order to live longer. So what people are learning, back in like the 80s or even the 90s, you kind of fit yourself into these buckets. You were an endurance athlete, maybe running a marathon or being a triathlete. You were in bodybuilding, you were a yogi. But in reality, it's really a combination of all three of those modalities that leads to the best outcome. The other one, aside from women, is really Gen Z. Gen Z today is probably the most informed generation when it comes to health and fitness than any other prior generation before it. They're coming in knowing that I need to do a bit of mobility, a bit of cardio, and a bit of strength in order to achieve the wellness goals that I'm trying to achieve. It's as much about aesthetics as it is about feeling good and being able to live the experiences which they want to live. One thing that we saw here is both of these brands, and I did a LinkedIn post about this, and what I found interesting is that two brands that could not be more different, Planet Fitness and Peloton, are both implementing the same strategy, which is to increase the focus on strength. With Planet Fitness's case, they're clearing out more cardio equipment to add more strength equipment. In Peloton's case, they're adding a separate app called Strength Plus, which is specifically designed to be used for strength programs at the gym. And not coincidentally, they both also released an earnings report in August, and both saw their stocks go up because of other performance indicators as well. So I think that's a good sign overall for the industry. And recently, Les Mills introduced a report around Gen Z and what they're interested in. One, 75% of Gen Z do workouts at home. So that's important to know. They're working out at the gym and at home. But the most popular activity at the gym, check this out. Number one is pin loaded or cable machines. So again, kind of going into the complexity of CrossFit with the Olympic lifts, they're going to these pin loaded machines. Two, group X classes. Three, free weights. And cardio is number four, right? So when all this focus has been on cardio, you have to go through like three different things before you get into what they're interested in. So they love it. They know it's important. But I do think that this shift it's been happening slowly. Now it'd be interesting to see how brands and companies evolve, because as we all know in our industry, we don't always we're not the fastest to innovate, we're not the fastest to evolve. We kind of, if a model likes, we don't change it unless we have to. But this is happening right in front of us. So I'd be curious to see how brands respond to this growing demand for strength.
The wait is over. Our new Escape Fitness catalog has landed. This is the essential guide to all of the latest product innovations that are shaping the future of functional training. Bigger and better than ever, this year's catalog is 190 pages, jam-packed with everything from eye-catching, bespoke functional training frames to some of the latest strength training equipment. So sign up today to receive the digital version today. So what are you waiting for? Go to escapefitness.com now.
In relation to your report, like what are you seeing when it comes to strength? Because I think there's definitely been the more hit style strength program where you'll do some cardio and then you work out with some dumbbells, and there's a few examples like Madbolic where they're specifically focusing on it, but it's relatively new when it comes to actual loading relatively heavier weight beyond dumbbells. Like I've seen a couple in LA. There's the guys from Fit Labs that have got one called Racked, which is basically you're working out on a squat rack and you're using sort of couple of 45-pound plates on an Olympic bar and building up from there. So are you seeing any real strength training in a Group X boutique type of environment yet?
Yes, we are. It is a challenge, I think, to do strength training on a squat rack with a large group of people. Obviously, form and technique is important, so that is certainly a challenge. But I think what we're seeing is brands that are coming in that are very strength focused. Metabolic, who scored very well in our process, and of course, you had Brandon on a few weeks ago, is one such example. They focus on, I think they call it interval strength training. So it's their own kind of approach to strength, but I don't know if they have cardio machines, but it's definitely very strength focused. And then we have kind of legacy brands like Orange Theory adding in pure strength classes. I think they call it Strength 50, something like that. So we're seeing some of the brands that traditionally have been more known for cardio introduce more strength. So yeah, I think in the boutique space, certainly we're seeing it as a continued trend. And what I'm seeing, especially here in Singapore, is really very dedicated strength studios. So they would have like a long rig, for example, more expensive classes, more expensive membership, but they're restricting their numbers down to like 10 people or perhaps 12 people and really focusing on compound barbell movements. So, in line with Peloton and Planet Fitness, I just see the boutique space continuing to adapt and to innovate as well. But the challenge is, of course, numbers. F45 has 36 people in a class, sometimes upwards from that. That's very difficult to do with proper strength training. So I think that is a challenge, especially in markets such as Hong Kong and New York.
Which is something that I actually have a question here for you. So, looking at one of the biggest opportunities in boutique fitness today, you surveyed several different types of boutique studios, spinning, strength, yoga, and others. What do you think for the boutique industry is the largest opportunity? Because everyone seemingly is in growth mode here in the US. You see brands like Solid Core on the Pilates side just absolutely crushing it. Soul Cycle seems to be recovering.
Yeah.
Orange Theory is still trying to continue to grow, looking at international as a growth area. They all are really different modalities. They're pushing the market differently. From looking at this global report, what do you find as being the biggest opportunity for boutique fitness today?
Yeah, I'll highlight two. So one opportunity is in, I think, certain modalities, or the data shows certain modalities. So yoga was the poorest performing modality. So of the yoga experiences that we visited and evaluated, that scored the worst, which was quite a surprise to me. But talking to people within the yoga industry, they sort of said, yeah, it's kind of makes sense. A lot of instructors are maybe more focused on their own practice or are neglecting some of the crucial client connections that we need to be doing before, during, and after the class. We saw this quite a lot of independent yoga studios. Again, maybe some, and again, I don't want to generalize here, but it's just what we saw. Perhaps some owners are neglecting some of the business side, so training of the staff, sales process, things like this. So to see your yoga score so poorly, worldwide. Not one club scored 5 stars under our process. I think showed there's a huge opportunity in that area. And if you look at Singapore, one club that is doing it very well, Yoga Movement, fantastic brand. They do focus a lot on the experience. They are absolutely smashing it, and they just opened their first location in Hong Kong. So I would say the yoga category, I think, is a huge opportunity for people doing this well and doing it right. And also, and I think we're seeing an explosion with Pilates. That was actually only our next best scoring category. We look at the experience from the first timer perspective. So it's not someone who's a Pilates instructor or has been doing Pilates for 10 years. We evaluate it from the perspective of someone like myself going in who doesn't really know much about Pilates. And so I think the opportunity is making sure that when someone like myself goes into a Pilates studio, you're making me feel comfortable, you're connecting with me, you're learning my name, you're showing me what this machine called a reformer is and how to use it, you're checking in with me after the class. And I think if a Pilates concept really nails those things, they will do very, very well, especially in this current climate where Pilates is just so popular and doing so well. The other opportunity kind of leads on from that, and it's just, yeah, that lack of client connection. I kind of knew this was the case because I travel a lot and I always visit gyms, and it didn't really surprise me that the industry didn't score particularly well in this area. But we've got to be doing more to connect with the client. Little things such as learning the name, which should be easy because we have our booking software on the screen so we can see their name, or if not, we should be asking for it. Smiling, making eye contact, asking how the class was, getting to know me a little bit. Our evaluators always arrive early. So do you live in New York? Are you just visiting? What kind of training do you normally do? And again, we have standards around this. I think this is a massive, massive opportunity. And if anyone's listening to this podcast and they want to take one thing, do training with your team on these elements to make sure that you're connecting with the client. Because if you're doing that, you will really stand out.
One of the things I was interested in, because I don't think there's a report such as this that covers all the different regions and all the different modalities. And I was wondering really if there's anything that stood out to you that differs between either regions or modalities. So, for example, are you seeing certain things in the US or New York that you're not seeing in Asia and vice versa, or are you seeing anything that that in particular with how like yoga's delivered? Like I remember when I was traveling a lot in Asia, that they did seem to be a lot more of these yoga Pilates style of classes in a lot of the studios, and they seem to do them quite differently than in Europe. That was my perception when I went out there. So is there anything like that stood out to you that's worth mentioning?
Yes, we look at the client experience. We don't so much look at trends. During our research phase for each city, we do a lot of analysis on which brands are doing well, what modalities are popular, which clubs are popular. So we do see some interesting things there. But during the evaluation process, it really is just the experience. One little thing that I noticed, which was an interesting surprise, was that New York studio owners and the brands in New York were just really open to what we're doing. They were really enthused by it. Many of them said, the industry needs something like this. They really got it and they really understood it, which I think showed that in the US, you guys really get hospitality. You understand why this is important. Now, it doesn't mean always that the experience scored well, but it was just interesting because it was our first launch city and no one really knew who we were, that we were received so well. Better than, say, London, where there was a little bit more hesitancy, who are you guys? Kind of a little bit for some clubs, who are you to come in and sort of say these things? Once we speak to the club and we show them our process, it's fine. But that was one interesting thing that we saw in New York. In Singapore, they scored really well on the class experience. So they've really got that nailed. They're using technology. The workouts are up on the screens. It's very well delivered during the class, but the reception services were extremely poor. And I've heard that's because there's part-time staff a lot on the front desk. They're just not that invested. And another interesting thing we saw worldwide, and this came from the context that goes below the data, conversations with studio owners or perhaps franchise owners. There's some clubs there or some brand owners that kind of make excuses a little bit. Things like, oh, you just can't hire the staff in New York, for example. And when a club owner says that, it always correlates to the poor experience that you're getting in the club. Whereas 3 clubs a few blocks away are doing this really well. And they've got the same job market. I'm sure they have the same pay amounts that they have to give to their staff and everything else. So that was quite interesting. Some clubs as well, when you speak to them, they say something along the lines of, we don't want to do sales. We want to let clients make up their own mind. And that's really reflected in how poorly they score in our sales process. We have standards around that. And we really try and educate club owners on why it's so important to do sales and why it's so important to do it right. We don't look for pushy sales, but we do look for things like asking questions, following up after the class, having something easy to refer to that shows your packages, being able to answer questions on the packages. So nothing is pushy. It's all just helping someone like me. If we go back to this example of me visiting a Pilates studio, if I enjoyed it, if I see the benefits, if the coach did a great job, the next step is get me doing Pilates regularly, 2 or 3 times a week. That was the poorest scoring category worldwide, was sales. And that's definitely one of the big things that we want to change, just because we want more people doing strength, Pilates, yoga, and all of these modalities to benefit them. And so I think we need a bit of a mindset shift in the boutique space.
By the way, you're the second, I think, guest in 2 weeks to refer to Matthew and I as being you guys in America. Matthew, I'm telling you, you are a bonus American citizen at this point. But the New York piece is really interesting because I think, again, we've got obviously a very US-based perspective. Matthew is a lot more international in this industry than I am. But in the US, we used to view LA and Southern California as really kind of being the innovation side for boutique, where a lot of modalities and ideas came up. Over the last decade, a lot of it has shifted to New York, and I think part of that is just the grit, the grind, and it's so competitive. Like, you go to every corner in New York. I don't know if there's another city when it comes to boutique fitness in the world that has as many locations per capita or per square mile than New York. So if you are not doing it, to your point, you can come up with an excuse and say, it's my lease, it's my landlord, it's my building. I mean, being in New York, I've even heard people tell me the ceiling height's an issue. Well, other people, to your point, are able to do this. It's really about having the right strategy, the right team in place. I mean, this business is as much of a people business as it is about like the physical modality and the actual workout. I mean, in some cases, a lot of things, as I'm hearing you talk about this, is you've very rarely mentioned the actual modality as being important. You really reference back to, how does the studio owner, if it's an independent, train the staff? How does the front desk team engage with people coming in? Do they know who I am? Are they able to build a community? So in terms of, what are the easiest things to fix? If you were to enable, some simple things, of course, you mentioned like greet someone, get to know them. In boutique fitness, because there's so much competition, because big box gyms are also getting into boutique fitness, they're opening up and getting better and better at it. You've got competitors like Les Mills, which is continually doing better and better. What does boutique fitness need to do? What are some things that they can fix to really be competitive and remain relevant to this new consumer?
Yeah, so first up, you're absolutely right. We don't look at the program, for example, because I'll give you 10 coaches and I'll give you 10 different opinions on whether this program is good or whether it's not. And actually, the average person doesn't really know what a good program is, and usually doesn't care as much as we as coaches think they care. So we look at purely the experience, right? The average person's experience. And just to allude to another of your points there, Mo, 75% is the person connection, how they treat you. And then 25% roughly is the structure, the design, the showers, things like that, because we believe that's the most important part of boutique fitness. So in theory, a club that really doesn't look that great, a little bit run down, isn't designed very well, could actually still score 5 stars on our process, because they just create an incredible experience. The community is there, they're introducing you to other people, and they really make you feel wonderful, make you feel special. And we've all been to clubs like that. The other way around, they couldn't score 5 stars on our process, because they might score very highly in that 25% or so. It might look fantastic, it might look great on Instagram, but the team there don't really care. They're on their phones, they're not making eye contact. And again, we've all been to clubs like that, and you leave thinking, okay, it looks great, but I'm not going to go back unless maybe I want another Instagram photo. So I think that's what the strength of the boutique fitness sector of the market is. We need to double down on that client connection, and that is really one of the, I wouldn't say easiest things to fix, it's probably got a tough thing to fix, but it's definitely an opportunity. It's harder for the big box gyms to do that. It's harder for them to know your name. They've got a lot of people coming in and out. Some of them don't even have front desk staff. So we have to take advantage of that. I call it like an unfair advantage that we have in boutique, that we must know everyone's name. We must know their dog's name, if they have any kids, what they do on the weekend. And so I think in terms of things to fix, I would just implore any boutique club operator to really focus on that. Just say to your team, even the importance of saying hello and goodbye as they come in and as they leave the studio. We talk about that a lot at base. Even if you're really busy, if you see someone leaving, just be thanks, bye, see you next week, or see you tomorrow, whatever it might be. Thank you, Jack. And often you can see them turn around and sometimes they've got headphones on, so they're a little taken aback, but they'll always wave, they'll always look happy. And what you've done then is you've nailed the final interaction, the last thing that happens with that brand, the last interaction before you walk away. And that is so, so important. I mean, that's one thing that you can train your team to do tomorrow, a warm introduction and a warm, when they leave, just something warm as well. So I think that's probably one of the easiest things to fix. Now, to really build out the class experience, the whole experience, and to get it nailed, you need to do a little bit more than that. So everyone really needs to be on board. We do even have standards with any interactions that you might have with any other staff. So an obvious one would be cleaning staff. Are they dressed appropriately? Are they friendly? Are they smiling? So if we don't encounter these staff, we don't mark those standards, they're non-applicable. But when we do encounter them, a club can score better. And you just can see and feel when the culture is strong. Every single person is really making an effort. When we make the telephone call as well, that's another important one. We've seen a whole range of interactions, from quite cold, they want to get you off the phone as soon as possible, to really welcoming you, wanting to get to know you, telling you comfortably about the concepts and wanting to get you in there. So I would say the probably easiest fix, but the biggest takeaway I'd say is really focus on every interaction that your team has through the whole client journey, from the moment they call or contact you before, for when they step into the club. When the front, Orange Theory do a fantastic job of this, the front desk member of staff will pass you on to the coach. They will say, Matthew, we've got Jack in your class today. Make sure you take care of him. Make sure you look after him. After the class, they explain through the technology. Orange Theory is one of the highest scoring brands that we've seen worldwide. And so I think any club owner can do this. Break down your journey, every interaction, what can be done to improve it, and then think a little bit more deeply about how you can improve the culture in your company so people really want to do this. That's the holy grail. The staff aren't just told to do it. They really want to do this, and they really see the benefit of it.
How are you seeing, like you've traveled around a lot of locations now. I accept that this is not in the report and this wasn't how you were ranking them, but what would you say is the health of this sector? Are they doing well? Are they struggling? Is it going to be a case of there'll be a lot fewer in the next few years, and the strong ones will survive and the rest of them will disappear? Because there was certainly an explosion pre-pandemic of many different concepts, and the bigger box clubs now have done a great job at sort of correcting and providing a similar boutique experience within the walls of a broader offering. So how would you answer that, Jack?
Great question. I think there are two tails within the industry. You've got some brands that are doing fantastically well, such as Solid Core, for example. They had an exit a year or two ago, and they're now looking to be resold, I think 750 million. And we've seen that they're creating a great experience. They've got regional managers that look at these things. So we're seeing some brands and clubs do exceptionally well. Orange Theory, again, doing very well. They're expanding quickly and looking at international markets. So there's definitely some brands doing well, and there's a lot just not doing well. So we did a recent review to see which of the first clubs during year one are still open, what's happening with them. And we did notice that a lot of them have closed down. And I think what we've seen over the last 10 years is it's harder now for independent studios, or not necessarily harder, but they're not doing as good a job of creating a great experience as some of these franchises, such as Solid Core or Orange Theory, which weren't as big 10 years ago. And for me, if you have an independent studio with kind of one or two clubs, and you're there as an owner operator, really you should be getting these things nailed. In some ways, I think it should be easier to do these things than these big chains. But whether it's because they're not approaching it in the right way, maybe it's lack of business acumen, they're just not delivering as good experience sort of by and large. So I think, yeah, some brands doing well, many brands not. I think a lot of it is region specific. So New York, rents are extremely high. It's a constant challenge to sort of find space and to have it appropriately priced. In Singapore, rents jumped up about 30 or 40% about a year ago. That was residential rental rates, but also commercial rental rates. And that pushed a lot of businesses out. So we spoke to a lot of clubs that were making a little bit of money, paying a salary, things were okay, they were enjoying it. Suddenly their rent jumped off when their lease was due to be renewed, and then that sort of business that was doing okay is now breaking even or losing money. So that caused a lot of closures as well. I see this being a continued challenge for sure. And I just hope, again, that some independent gym owners are listening to this and realize that, hey, I actually have a bit of an advantage over an Orange Theory and that I can really focus on my one or two clubs. What can I do better than these big brands that have hundreds of studios around the world? Again, what's my unfair advantage over them? And they really focus on these things, because otherwise, yeah, I think it's going to be tough. So whilst we don't see the numbers, Matthew, I think it is a tough sector, and I think we're seeing that through some of the casualties.
Mo, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
This has been enlightening for sure. Right? There's so much to take away from this report, but I think the key thing here is there's an opportunity for boutique fitness, and when you really think about it, a big box gym, so much of the digital kind of work that we do, we're trying to use digital in the big box side at least to as a tool to almost not diminish but really enhance or supplement the human interaction, everything from front desk staff to personal training. But we are building the tools so that in front desk where you have high turnover, that yeah, we could train them up quickly because of digital solutions, everything from check-in to workout programs and so on. When you look at the boutique fitness, and it's funny, you mentioned Orange Theory doing so well. That Matthew and I both work with Orange Theory Fitness, and they also use technology, but technology enhances the actual experience. Yet that experience, to your point, is delivered in a very human to human way. You referenced the front desk staff handing you off to the coach. I've experienced that when I go to Orange Theory Fitness as well. So I think that is the difference. That is what you want to pay for. People will pay a premium because they're now interacting with a human rather than an app. Even though both boutique and big box will have an app, but it's where the focus is. The focus, instead of being in the app, it's in the human connection. So having the coach involved, knowing your name, seeing the birthday celebration, not just in an app, but I remember going to SoulCycle on my birthday or my wedding anniversary, and they dragged like the whole kind of place out, right? Because I was a frequent SoulCycle rider. So, and you lose track of that because there's so much investment going into technology, into international growth, that when you really distill boutique down to first principles, it's about the human connection. So I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've seen from speaking with you today. Matthew, any big takeaways?
It's an interesting one. We've had a number of episodes where we've spoken about boutique, and it's a curious space. And I know on the report, Jack, you referenced that it's not modality specific, but certainly in my experience, and again, we're generalizing. There are exceptions, but if you do generalize, then there are some modalities that tend to do better in a boutique situation, and they tend to be things that do not get executed well in the larger clubs. And I guess I'm curious, maybe in future reports, to see if there is any correlation, because certainly things like some of the yoga and Pilates based studios seem to work quite well. And whether there's a number of people that we've had on before on this podcast before that have that have very, very successful brands, but it just seems that a lot of some of the hit based ones and the cycle ones, they seem to, maybe there's a lot more of them and they tend to struggle. So, but I'm curious to see if there's a correlation between the modalities themselves along obviously with all the things that you mentioned, Jack, such as service, etc.
I think the best next step for anyone listening is we'll give 2 free reports to anyone listening, so you can choose from the modalities and also the cities. So we have individual reports for, say, New York and London, and then also an individual report for, say, HIIT and strength and cycling. So if anyone just goes to thefitsguide.com and then mentions Lift's podcast, they can claim 2, so they can start to dig through it and start to have a look. And I just want to mention your point, Mo. Digital and technology is something that we look at. I think it's extremely important. That could be the branding on the email. We look for, is it branded? Does it maybe have a photo that gives you an idea of what you're going to experience? Do they let you know of the late coming policy, for example? We'll send each club a message. How quickly do they get back? Do they answer politely? And there's a lot that you can do to make this easier, right? There's a lot of automations that you can do. You mentioned SoulCycle have some sort of birthday thing that they do in branch. I'm sure technology tells the front desk team that that's coming up, whether they've done 500 classes. So whether it's on the client side or whether it's on the operator side, digital technology is huge. And that feeds into the human connection. Just because we're focusing on human connection in many of the things that we've talked about today, that doesn't mean that digital technology can't help. It absolutely can, and it's kind of the only way to really do this well and to do this properly. So we have a whole section on that. And of course, and if anyone wants to build that out more, they can speak to you, Mo.
All right, well, thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Lifts. If you did, then we'd love you to share it with 1 or 2 other people so that we can get this out to more people. Thank you again for listening.